Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
I
you
guess.
can.
Well, it's a
Yes.
bit parched. Okay, go ahead.
So we are live, Father. So for all the people who are tuning in right now, Father, I know it was providential how both of us got in touch. As soon as this thing was happening regarding the liturgy, I really wanted to speak to someone who is an expert on this. Then I got in touch with the Archdiocese of Bombay, and they all unanimously said that you are the right person to talk, and that's how we got in touch. So for people who do not know who you are, Father, could you just briefly introduce yourself?
Okay, good morning to all of you. I, right at the outset, want to say I'm so happy to be on this program because I love to share knowledge about the church, the teachings of the church, which are so immensely rich, and particularly on the liturgy, which has been so much enhanced as we go ahead. I am a priest of the Don Bosco Order, a Salesian of Don Bosco.
Yes.
I am now assigned to Boys' Home, St. Dominic Savio Boys' Home in Andheri, Mumbai.
Okay.
Very interestingly, this year I am celebrating my golden jubilee of priesthood.
Oh wow! Congrats, Father. I didn't know that.
50 years since I was ordained,
Yeah.
and I may say right away, I was ordained in 1971. So that was, if you know, just on the threshold of Vatican II.
Yes.
Okay, when things were very hot in those days.
Yeah.
Um, I have got a specialization both in Rome and the United States in catechetics and liturgy. Therefore, I love to share whatever I can. I keep updating myself, of course, all the time. I am just now teaching in the Bombay Seminary, St. Pius X, Goregaon. I teach the first year theology and introduction to liturgy. I also teach Salesian clerics in Nashik, but for them I take a course on catechetics. So these are subjects which are very dear to my heart, and I'm looking forward to all the questions that you will throw at me. Please don't be afraid. I'll try my best to answer,
Yes, Father.
and
Yeah.
I hope they will satisfy.
Yes, Father. And I just want to affirm you that everything is all right. We are live, and I hope you are comfortable, Father. It's all right with.
Very comfortable, yes.
Yes, and Father, so I'm always excited to know the the different places that priests have served throughout their career. So as a Salesian, so you're part of the Mumbai province.
Yes.
So could you take us through
But
quickly?
that's another very exciting question you're asking me,
Yes,
because out of these 50 years of my priesthood,
yes.
I've spent 20 of them in East Africa,
Oh wow.
in
Okay,
Kenya and in Tanzania.
okay.
And out of the 20, maybe around 15 to 16 years, I spent in lecturing on catechetics and liturgy in the studentates of theology.
Yes.
So, in that sense, I was a different type of missionary.
Yeah.
I left India in 1988 and came back in 2008.
Mm.
And since then, I have been at Don Bosco, Matunga,
Mm.
which is the provincial house,
Mm.
and also rector of the school.
Mm.
From there, I moved to Borivali. I was in a parish there.
Mm.
And from there, I've come here.
Okay.
Before that, I've been, I would say, 5 times to Rome on different occasions, but I've been in different formation houses normally.
Okay.
That's briefly how these 50 years have flown by so fast.
Yeah, and they have a school in Matunga, right, Father? Don Bosco School.
Yeah, a very big school, high school.
Yeah, and I recently interviewed a person who was an agnostic, and he studied in Don Bosco Matunga, and he was saying that is the best school in India. And I was arguing because I am a past pupil of Don Bosco Egmore, so I'm also a Salesian product. So I was
Oh,
saying
that's
Don.
nice to hear.
Yeah, so I was telling him, no, 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 it's Don Bosco Egmore, which is the best school in India. So we have you been to Don Bosco Egmore?
I don't know, they have this type of grading, some educational thing in Delhi, and
Yeah.
they have uh, assessed Don Bosco Matunga as one of the best.
Oh
I don't
no.
know.
And Father, so you also served briefly as the secretary of the Liturgy Commission for the Archdiocese?
Yes, for 3 years I was the secretary of the Liturgical Commission of the Archdiocese, and they were very nice years because we tried to set up in every parish what is called the PLT, the Pastoral Liturgy Team.
Okay.
Okay, that gives life to the liturgy. And then we have held courses. Just 2 weeks ago, I did the introduction course to the basic liturgy course that the center runs. And this year, because it was online, people don't have to travel. We had as many as 62 participants. So just now I'm occupying myself reading all their assignments and grading
Okay.
them.
And Father, you're basically a Mangalorean. Your roots are from Mangalore or Goa?
No, I've lived all my life in Bombay,
Okay.
but my ancestral roots are in Goa.
Goa. Okay. Because people were confused when they heard the name Dsouza, Wilfred Dsouza. So some were saying Father could be a Goan, and some were saying you could be a Mangalorean. Some even
Yeah,
went
that's her name. It's, in Bombay we have what are called the gems.
Okay.
The Goans, the
East.
East Indians, the Mangaloreans, and then the South Indians. So we have a mix of all.
Gems. Yeah, Father. So, going into, a topic of discussion today. So, if you can, kind of tell us what was the letter that was sent by Pope Francis in the context of the liturgy, and what was he trying to say, and why is there so much of uproar regarding the fact that, Pope Francis restricted the traditional Latin Mass for all of us?
At the very outset, I'd like to draw your attention to the title. This is what is called an Apostolic Letter, a motu proprio, which means at the will of the Holy Father himself. And he has entitled it very fittingly, Traditionis Custodes. You know that all the Vatican documents begin in Latin,
Yes.
the first words.
Yes.
And this translated means the guardian of tradition.
Okay.
So what Pope Francis is doing simply is that he is safeguarding tradition. So all the guns are trained against him.
Yeah.
He is not doing something on his, on his own will and fancy. He is really guarding the tradition of the Church, of which the Vatican II is probably the greatest milestone, maybe after the Council of Trent, which
Yes.
was about 500 years ago.
Yes, and so if we could explain what is this, traditional Latin Mass and what is this Novus Order, if you can give a brief introduction of both, and then we can go into the complicated questions, Father.
See, to give you the right terminology, the pre-Vatican Mass is called the extraordinary form of the Mass. And the post-Vatican renewed Mass that we celebrate today is called the ordinary form of the Eucharist.
Yes.
So this already tells you where we stand.
Okay.
Because when we use these terms like novus and vetus means old, old and new, you are already creating a division in the Church.
Yes.
So there's some in the Church who belong to one school of the old and others who belong to the new school, and that is definitely not what the Church wants. We are one holy, Catholic and apostolic.
Yes.
Okay, so there's no old and new.
Mm.
It's the former one which today becomes extraordinary, and that is why all the popes, not just Pope Francis, has limited the use of this
Mm.
and promoted rather the post-Vatican celebration of the Eucharist
Mm.
as we know it today from the Roman Missal.
Mm. So, is it? Am I right in saying that the Tridentine Missal of Pope Pius V is called the extraordinary form, which is also the traditional Latin Mass, and the Vatican II Missal of Pope Paul VI is the ordinary form, which is also known as Novus Ordo. Am I right in saying that, Father?
Okay, it's also called the Tridentine Mass
Yes.
because though there were many changes
Mm.
down to the history
Mm.
between Council of Trent and Vatican II,
Mm.
the Council of Trent did not have time to give to liturgy. It was too huge a sector to be opened.
Mm.
And why? Because the Council of Trent was more concerned about
The Protestant
the
Reformation.
Reformation.
Mm.
So the Council of Trent was rather a council that was more apologetic,
Soft.
defensive, doctrine inclined.
Mm.
Okay, and that is why it did not touch the Mass as it was at that time.
Mm.
And that is how we reached Vatican II in 1965
Mm.
with that Mass. Now, Council of Trent was held around 1535.
Mm.
Okay, so you can imagine how many years we got stuck with Latin.
Mm. Okay, so yeah, so that is the Tridentine Missal of Pope Pius V, which is the traditional Latin Mass, and the Vatican Missal of Pope Paul VI, which we call the ordinary form or the Novus Ordo. So now the basic question, the obvious question is, Father, why did the Church want to reform the liturgy? Was not the traditional Latin Mass in itself sufficient for us to adhere to the faithful?
Oh, that's a very big question. For that, your listeners must really go into the history of the Church.
Yes.
When Jesus celebrated the Last Supper, he did not do it in Latin.
Mm.
Okay, he did it in the language of the apostles.
Mm.
In the Acts of the Apostles, when the Christians met for the breaking of the bread,
Mm.
they did not do it in Latin.
Mm.
They did it in the language of the first Christians.
Mm.
And for right up to about 4 or 5 centuries of the church,
Mm.
there was no dispute at all. Now, around the 4th century,
Mm.
when the Roman emperor became a Christian, Constantine,
Yes.
that changed the whole course of history
Mm.
as far as the church is concerned. Before that, it was a persecuted church, etc.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, everybody wanted to be a Christian.
Mm.
And in this dimension, hordes of tribes, especially from Northern Europe, began to enter into the church.
Mm.
And they all came with their own languages.
Mm.
And this became chaotic. So that is when, around the 6th century, the church decided
Mm.
to have one uniform language in which everybody could, understand each other.
Mm.
And that is how Latin came in the church.
Yes.
Okay, so now just imagine from which century it came and to which century it has lasted.
Mm.
Now, over time, especially around the 8th, 9th centuries,
Mm.
liturgical books began to be written, what are called Sacramentaries.
Okay.
And they began gradually to bring in a lot of changes
Mm.
in the celebration of the Mass.
Mm.
But as I already told you, Council of Trent retained Latin.
Mm.
Okay. Now, why was there need to revise or reform the liturgy? Now, that's a very important point because it has not been done by one pope or by one person.
Mm.
In the course of the church's history, there have been tremendous minds of the church, intellectuals.
Mm.
Like, for instance, at the Council of Trent, Thomas Aquinas, Charles Borromeo, okay, and the other great theologians of the church brought in a whole new thinking about
The liturgy.
giving an answer to the Reformation,
Yes.
Martin Luther and company.
Yes.
Okay, so that was already one change, but it was more doctrinal, apologetic, defensive teaching. After that, as the church progressed in the 19th century, we have what is called the beginning of a liturgical movement in the church.
Okay.
So now we're going back to the 19th century. And when we talk about the 19th century, we are talking about, first of all, the monks of Solens, the Benedictine monks. You know, the Benedictines became well known for their liturgy. Okay, so they began experimenting with the little changes. So they are, in a certain sense, the precursors of this whole liturgical movement. Together with them, we have great liturgists like Guarini, Guardini, Ordo Castle, Pius Pars, and several others who began to gradually work out the whole meaning of celebration, not just the Eucharist, but the whole liturgy. So this was around the 19th century, and then we had two great popes, Pope Pius X and Pope Pius XII. In fact, Pope Pius XII is the one who revised the whole celebration of Holy Week that we have today, which is so beautiful. Okay, before that, it was lost in all the other rituals. So all this, so to say, prepared the way for Vatican II.
Okay.
And you have to understand that the church is moving with the times. In fact, the key word is the signs of the times. The church has to read the signs of the time. Now, why was Latin there earlier? Latin was a language which neither the priest knew nor the people knew. There were no seminaries right up to the time of Council of Trent, so the priests themselves were not educated. And certainly there were no schools in which the ordinary people would learn. So therefore, when this Latin Mass came in, it was something that nobody understood. Okay? And that was one of the great things of Vatican II. Says, how can we worship in a language that we don't understand and that we cannot communicate? Okay, so briefly, that is more or less why there was need for the... It's not a full answer, but it leads to that.
So, the follow-up question would be, Father, a lot of the radical traditionalist people ask is, first is the claim that Latin is the language of the church, and second is that if it has served the people for more than, almost 19 centuries, the Latin has served people, the faithful, then why now suddenly remove Latin and move to vernacular?
Yeah. So that's precisely what I'm saying. Just because we had it for 1,000 years doesn't mean that we have to continue. Okay, the whole world has changed today. To start with, Latin is a dead language. Okay, nobody uses Latin today, nobody reads Latin today. And today even the bishops and cardinals themselves do not know Latin as such, because it is not a subject that is in use. Much less the people. And one of the very foundational aspects of liturgy is the work of the public. It's a public work. Liturgia means a public work. So how can the people participate fully in a language that they don't understand and they don't use? So that was basically why the scholars and the liturgists felt the need of moving from Latin to the language of the people. And secondly, the Vatican II also brought in the whole point of inculturation. For so centuries, it was just Rome that was imposing its culture, its language, and its rituals all over. Okay? And so the scholars said, why should it be like that? Okay, people are worshipping God in their own culture. Jesus accepted the Jewish culture. He grew up in that culture and he spoke and he worshipped, etc. He read the scriptures. No? So that is the whole point. It's not that Latin is bad. And by the way, no one is saying that the extraordinary form of the Mass is wrong, is illegitimate, is not valid. Nobody is saying that. Okay?
So, so you also mentioned that the Latin came into the church because of the Roman Empire, and Constantine became Christian,
Yeah.
and that's how Latin came into the church. Another question is, Father, so if you say that the traditional Latin Mass is not illicit or it's not illegitimate, then why was there a necessary for us to, reform from that to a new way of worshipping? Because as for us, Eucharist is the source and summit of Christian life, as Vatican II, the Second Council says. So then, why was there a need for a reform if it was already good? Why couldn't have they just changed the language and just had their same right?
Don't mix up issues. When you say liturgy is the source and summit of the Christian life, that is from Sacrosanctum Concilium, paragraph 10.
Yes.
And that is absolutely right. But language has got nothing to do with that. Precisely because it is the source and summit, it has to be in a language that I'm speaking. I need to speak to God. I need to speak to one another. And that is another very foundational idea of Vatican II, that our liturgy is not clergy dominated. It is the people of God that gather together to worship. So the extraordinary form of the Mass ended up in being a very passive thing. Everything was done by the priest. In fact, he even had his back to the people. So what kind of worship is this? What is he communicating to the people? Where is the dialogue? Where is the common worship of the people? Today the whole Mass is a complete dialogue, is a complete participation. For that reason, the altar has come closer to the people. For that reason, the communion rails that separated the people has been removed. That is why today people take a more active part in the celebration of the Mass as lectors, as acolytes, as Eucharistic ministers, etc. So these are all the development of the liturgical theology. Okay, so it's not just changes for sake of fancy or because it's more attractive, whatever.
Yes, and another complaint that I've heard from the radical traditionalist is, Father, they say that the Tridentine Mass, the traditional Latin Mass, was passed down from the apostles and ever since then to the church. But somehow they think that the Novus Order is made up by the Roman Curia and by Vatican II by a group of people. What
Oh my! I just took the trouble of giving you the history. The apostles didn't celebrate Mass in Latin. The apostles didn't have the whole rite of the Tridentine Mass. In fact, it was not even called Mass at that time. It was not even called Eucharist. It was called the breaking of the bread. So there's a whole beautiful historical development of theology, of history, and this is not done by the Curia. This is done by eminent minds. I told you, Thomas Aquinas, Charles Borromeo, all these people, and then later on, all these liturgists whom I mentioned.
Yes.
So there's a whole backing behind this. Please don't think that it is just Pope Francis who got up one morning and said, okay, now we'll have only this Mass. No, not at all. And that is why, please pay attention to the title of his letter. Custos Traditionis. This is all the tradition of the church that has come down to our day. Now, as you said very correctly, there are those who call themselves traditionalists. So once you're hardened in your way of thinking, once you've made up a mindset that is not going to change, once you have determined that everything that the church is doing today is wrong, then you can have 3 or 4 of these sessions and nothing will change.
That's true,
You
Father.
understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, yes.
So the whole thing is that if you want to move with the church, then move with the church. One holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. It is the church of the apostles. No?
And
A
another.
lot of people have left the church, they have started their own churches, they do their own things, which is quite okay. They will go to heaven. But you can't belong to the church and at the same time reject the church. And this is exactly what happened to Archbishop Lefebvre. You know Archbishop?
The Vatican, after Vatican II, yeah.
Yeah. He deliberately, consciously, and determinately rejected Vatican II.
But he signed the Vatican II documents. After that, he rejected it. That's the funny part.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
I mean, anybody can put a sign there because he was part of Vatican II.
Yes.
He was participating in all those discussions. And what happened to him? He started his own order. So he divided the church. So today there is no such thing as traditionalists. There's no such thing as conservatives and progressives. Now a lot of people, as I said, are turning their weapons and guns against Pope Francis, saying he's a liberal. He's not a liberal. He is a thorough post-Vatican member of the church. Traditionis custodes.
And a lot of people also, complained about the very fact that you mentioned, Father. The Vatican II gave a lot of emphasis for inculturalization, especially in different forms of the aspects of the faith. So people say that the Mass was diluted, or it was made more, it was made in a way that it was accommodating other religious people. So, then they say that in the new Novus Ordo Mass, the identity of the Catholic worship has been compromised because it was moving too much into the direction of inculturalization.
Not at all. This is absolutely ridiculous, to say the least. It is a wrong understanding of inculturation. You go down to the first council of Jerusalem. I'm going back to history and tradition.
Yes.
Okay, what happened in that first council of Jerusalem?
They decided about the circumcision.
Peter himself was saying the non-Jews have to be circumcised.
Yes.
If they are to join the church. What did Paul say?
No, that's not what we decided.
We have the Spirit of Jesus Christ. We don't need any more circumcision. And there was a dispute, as there is today. What did they do? They went to the Council of Jerusalem. What did the Council of Jerusalem decide? There's no need of circumcision. That is a classic example of inculturation. So inculturation is not borrowing things from other religions. Please throw that idea out. Tell those who are holding on to this to throw it out. So we are not accommodating ourselves to Hinduism or to Sikhism or to the Buddhists or to any other religion. That's an absolutely false idea of inculturation. Inculturation is really understanding what we are doing to bring God in. Not to bring God in our culture. God is already there. To discover God in the Christian culture, not in the Roman culture. Not what the Roman Empire imposed upon us. That's not our culture. So today we are not strictly speaking Roman Catholics. We are Indian Catholics. We have our own culture and we are proud of it. I'm not talking Hinduism.
And also there is another complaint, Father, that the cardinal was put in charge of the liturgical reform. I forget his name. I think it starts with B, Bonucci or something. So they say that he had a lot of discussion with the non-Christian brethren, like Protestants, and then he made the liturgy in line so that it can appeal to the Protestants too. What do you think of that claim, Father?
Okay, give me that source, please.
That's what I also asked. They were saying...
Yeah, because, see, everyone is bringing their own 2 pies, okay, or 2 paisa worth of arguments.
Yes.
That don't stand. I gave you the history just now. I gave you the names. Go back into the history of the church, which is the authentic history. that one cardinal cannot change everything.
But he can.
Immediately after Vatican II, first thing that Pope Paul VI did was to create a council, concilium, for the implementation of Sacrosanctum Concilium. So it was the work of a whole body of experts, not one cardinal saying something and one cardinal trying to do one thing. See, that's the whole problem with some people. No, they bring their own very futile arguments. And that council then developed into what we have today, the Congregation for Divine Worship and Sacraments. And so it is this congregation, again made up of experts, not just somebody picked up here and there, okay, who makes studies, who enters into research, who is backed up by years of theology and development, etc. In fact, coming back to Pope Francis's Apostolic Letter, I told you he didn't get up one morning and write this letter by himself.
They had a study.
It's a work of 3 years. Go back to the letter. Okay, the Doctrine of Faith sent out a questionnaire to all the bishops, asking them to assess the situation of the extraordinary Mass in their diocese, whether it was contributing to the pastoral and spiritual care of the faithful. Now, these are very important words.
Yes.
Not whether people like it or people don't like it or people want it or people don't want it. The question is that the liturgy has to cater towards the spiritual and pastoral growth of the people. So, they made their own assessment. They sent it all to Rome. It was studied by the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, which has the responsibility of safeguarding doctrine and morals. Then it was passed on to the Congregation for Divine Worship to look at it from the worship point of view. So before Pope Francis sent out this letter, there's a lot of study done. It's not one man. So why are they shooting at Pope Francis?
And also, Father, another. So after the Vatican II Council, so Pope Paul VI, it was then the line of Pope was Pope John Paul I, II, Pope Benedict, and now Pope Francis. Even they have so Pope John Paul II put certain restrictions on the extraordinary form, the Latin Mass, and then when Pope Benedict came, he kind of relaxed and said, you can, even individual priest can decide to celebrate Latin Mass. And now we see the reversal of the practice again with Pope Francis. So why have been the post-Vatican popes have been up and down on this issue of the Latin Mass?
No. It's not up and down. See, Benedict the 16th, and I would encourage your friends to read the Summorum Pontificium.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the document in which he gave a little more liberty, so to say, to this extraordinary form. And he said very clearly that that was to facilitate the celebration of the Eucharist for a special group of people who had grown up with this. Okay, because he realized that there was a little discomfort. And very careful words, facilitate people who had grown up with this tradition. Now, when you have a change, it's very difficult to make a change. Especially the older people who have celebrated Mass for years together, okay, to change overnight becomes difficult. So it was not what you call it, liberalization. You can do what you want. It was a concession. And if you read Summorum Pontificium, Pope Benedict said very clearly the bishops will have to keep studying the situation, and if it is causing problems, to take action. And that is precisely what Pope Francis is doing. Pope Francis has not banned the extraordinary Mass. Okay, he has not said that it is bad, it is wrong, it is invalid. He's put restrictions so that gradually it will phase out and the church will have only one form of worship, which is the authentic form of the celebrating the Eucharist in the Catholic Church today. So that is what the so-called traditionalists or conservatives, or call them what they want, need to understand. And they are not greater than the scholars. They are not greater than the magisterium. They are not greater than all these experts that make up the teaching authority of the church, the congregations. Okay, there are groups of people here and there who are trying to push their own agenda.
So, and regarding the phasing out, Father, I was having that kind of conversation with one of the radical traditionalists, and he was telling me that, it's not like the liturgy is not a product where you bring in a new product and you phase out the old product. It's a tradition, and how can you phase out a tradition? And especially as Catholics, we hold sacred tradition as one of the pillars of the faith. What would you say for that, Father?
Yes. So tell him that if he has a commercial mindset, then of course nothing in the church makes sense.
Yes.
Okay? So nothing is written in stone and marble when it comes to traditions. Go through the history of the church. Traditions have been constantly changing. Constantly changing. Not just now with Pope Francis. But the essential does not change. And that is safeguarding. Custodes traditiones. I told you, look at the title of this document. So who said tradition is being changed or thrown away? Who says? Your friends. Oh, sorry, not your friends, but the so-called group of people.
Yes.
Tradition is maintained because tradition is the deposit of faith that has to be guarded, protected, handed over. What's the meaning of the word tradition? The word tradition comes from the Latin word tradere, which means to hand over.
Yes.
Okay, so what Pope Francis is doing is nothing but handing over a tradition that has come from the Last Supper through the apostles and through the history of the church. So who says that he is destroying tradition?
And also, Father, you spoke about the liturgical movement which started in the early 19th century and eventually it led up to the Vatican II Council. So
One sector of Vatican II.
Yeah. So some people say that there was a conspiracy against the liturgy by a lot of Protestants who wanted the church to move more towards the Protestantism, and a lot of cardinals were very sympathetic to that view, and that is why you see in the Novus Order more of liberal way of worship in terms of the liturgy.
Give me the names of these people. Give me the documents that show what they said and why they said and when they said. Give me the names of bishops who contributed to listening to the Protestants. Give me specific instances, okay, where there is the Protestant influence in the celebration of the Eucharist today. On the contrary, part of the problem, I'm talking about the main churches, Anglican, Baptist, Methodist. I'm not talking about all these sects that I just started yesterday.
Yes.
Okay, these have broken away from the church. Don't forget. Don't forget, they broke away from the one church. And why did they break away? Precisely for this. They wanted to uphold their own way of looking at tradition and the essential teaching of the church. So today, they don't have the living presence of Jesus that we in the Catholic Church give such importance to.
Yeah.
They do not have the real belief in the transubstantiation. For them, it's only a memorial for some groups. So this is what I'm trying to say. These are all doctrinal points which some of these so-called traditionalists do not understand. And they come out with all these statements that have absolutely no foundation. Yes. So give me names, give me documents, give me instances which are not there.
And even if it were there, let's say all that they are saying is true, Father, the Pope Paul VI would not simply approve a liturgical reform just like that. As you say, so many experts are studying this. Even if there was an infiltration of Protestant ideology, the church, the Pope would not have just, granted the reform just like that, isn't it?
Joseph, now I'm going to say something very interesting.
Yes.
First of all, when the bishops met in the council and when they meet in synods, they are not just saying yes, 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 yes to what Pope Francis says. They're coming with their own mind, they're coming with their own perceptions, they're coming with their own points of view. So that's okay. That's okay. That's the reason why they are coming together. So even if some bishops came influenced by Protestants and brought it to the council, there's nothing wrong in that. That only enhances the discussion, the study, the research, and the listening and one another.
Yes.
Okay? Now the second point is this. There's a point of ecumenism. And today, we're going a little out of the topic, so I won't take much time.
Sure.
Today, a lot of these Protestant groups are realizing that the Catholic Church has only got the real tradition. Do you know that some Anglicans have left their church and joined us?
Yes.
And they continue even as married priests
Yeah.
with a special dispensation. You know that particularly Pope Francis, but also Pope John Paul II and the other Benedict, they have been meeting the Lutherans very often. And the Lutherans are having really good discussions with us Catholics. See, this was one of the problems with Council of Trent, okay, that looked upon the Reformation, and it was so. It was a schism. It was a breakaway from the church. So at that time, the Council of Trent was very apologetic, very defensive. You were told not to go to the Protestants, not to read their Bibles, not to talk to them, and not to attend their services and all. Now you realize Vatican II has realized, is God going to throw them into hell because they left the church? On the contrary, one of the most beautiful things, there are many beautiful things about Vatican II, is ecumenism, dialogue. And what was Christ's prayer at the Last Supper, St. John's Gospel? That they may all be one. And today what is happening after Vatican II, rather than saying they are spoiling our liturgy, we are saying let us look at the richness that there is. Okay? They are not satanic, they are not, what do you call it, they are good people, they are Christians, they believe in Jesus Christ, they have the scriptures. So to talk like this means you have not really understood what's going on in the church today. You're still stuck somewhere centuries behind.
I actually made the same point to one of the traditionalist father, and she said that you do not, follow the spirit of ecumenism at the expense of Catholic identity. You have to,
What is the expense? What is the? Tell me what the expense is. Spell it out.
Like in terms of the liturgical reform,
spell it out. Spell it out. The reform did not come about because we wanted to accommodate to the Protestants. Make that very, very clear. The reform came about because we were reading the signs of the times.
Yes.
And because of the richness of theology that developed to say that worship has to be the people of God coming together. And again, a very basic maxim of Sacrosanctum Concilium is the full, active, conscious participation in the Mass. All this was missing in the Tridentine Mass before Vatican II. And it has got nothing to do with the Protestants. Why blame those poor people? They have their own. In fact, they gave us this whole idea of community worship. They worship much more. They have more fellowship, which today the church is really struggling to get. Look at our struggle for small Christian communities. Look at our struggle for participation in the Eucharist. We still have choirs that are singing. That is gone. People have to sing. Raise your voice to praise the Lord. I can give you another few examples, but we have to go ahead.
And is there any change in theology between the TLM and the Novus Order, Father? Is there any change of theology in terms of the liturgy?
Not at all. Not at all. The theology is absolutely the same. We are celebrating the Paschal mystery, the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. We are celebrating the Last Supper. The Mass is a sacrifice and a meal. Jesus says, "Take and eat, this is my body." Has the ordinary Mass changed all this? Has it thrown all this out? Not at all. On the contrary, it has made something very, very meaningful.
And another...
I'll give you something else, though you're not asking me the question.
Sure.
Well, let me see if it comes up. Oh, let me take it now.
Okay.
I would like to ask my friends to pay attention to the liturgy of the Word, which again the Church is struggling to get our Catholics to appreciate. In the Tridentine Mass, what was happening? The priest was reading the Word to himself. People would try to look at a translation in a missalette, but that's not the same. Today, look at the richness of the liturgy of the Word. It is proclaimed from the table of the Word. You know that we have two tables from which we are nourished at every Mass, Vatican II. The table of the Word of God and the table of the sacrifice. So it is proclaimed, not read. Proclaimed means we are all listening attentively. And whose word is this?
The Word of God.
The word of the Lord and the gospel of the Lord, of Jesus Christ. So who's talking to us? Not the lector. Who's talking to us is God Himself, which was not happening in the Tridentine Mass. Then we respond as a community. And we don't stop there. We take God's message out with us at the end of the Mass. Because Vatican II says that liturgy is life. Liturgy is not some, mystic, awe-inspiring, nice feeling that you have. And it ends with that. No. Liturgy is connected to life. We bring life to the liturgy and we take liturgy to our life. So look at the richness of this tradition that has come down, because this is what Jesus did. This is what the apostles did. Look at the Acts of the Apostles when they celebrated the breaking of the bread. It was so much touched to life, which unfortunately the Tridentine Mass, in a certain sense, I'm not criticizing the Mass, lost, and Vatican II has regained. That is the whole that is the whole richness of revising and reforming, going back to what it really means.
That's well said, Father, because I like what you said. We derive life from the Eucharist, and we take that to our life to, be a gift to the society, our family, and so on. So, I know another complaint is precisely what you are mentioning, Father. Like, a lot of traditionalists say that the mystery of the Mass is taken away in the Novus Order. There's no more mystery, is what they are saying. What would you say for that, Father?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, I wanted to say this at the end.
Okay.
But let's say it now, because at the end, people will be distracted.
Yeah.
I've been celebrating Mass for 50 years. Celebrated more than one Mass a day sometimes. Every time I go to the altar, the Mass is a new experience for me. And that is mystery. Every time I celebrate the Mass, I am meeting the risen Jesus. Every time I take the sacred body of Christ in my hands, that is the mystery I'm celebrating. So for those people to say that we have thrown out the mystery, I don't know what they are talking about.
They're talking more of the gestures, I feel, Father.
No. Every single gesture has a depth of meaning. Now that is why, coming back to my experience, I articulate every word that I say at the Mass. I wish every priest would do this. And I wish every Catholic who comes to Mass, okay, understands every word that is said. And that is why we had a revision of the English translation of the Mass. You know that, no? Of course, it didn't work in many ways, but that's another question, no? So the question is this: the mystery still exists. Okay? Now, I will come to something very serious. Unfortunately, after Vatican II, what happened in many places in the church was lack of catechesis, lack of adult faith formation. This was just thrust upon people. Up to today, many people have not even opened the documents of Vatican II.
Yes.
But they are pontificating and they are talking as if they are the experts.
Yeah.
Look at Dei Verbum, just to give you another example of Vatican II. Such a rich document on the Word of God. And because of that, today, people are reading the Bible, they're finding the Bible a living word, they're attending Ministry of the Word sessions. This is all a overflow of Vatican II. I can go on talking about Vatican II the whole evening.
Yes.
So to say that only the Latin Mass is the only thing and all the rest is bunkum, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'll just give you one, metaphor. If a carpenter says, I couldn't make a nice chair because the saw and the chisel and this were not working, I would tell the carpenter, the fault is not with the saw and the chisel.
It's with you.
The fault is with the carpenter. So don't throw the baby out with the bath water. Let us admit, and I'm the first one to admit, that we have not helped our people to understand the ordinary form of the Mass. Even today, people do not know what the Eucharistic prayer is all about. People do not know what the different parts of the Mass really mean. The introductory rite, the offertory rite, the communion rite, the rite of peace. These are not empty gestures. They are full of mystery, full of meaning, which is not present in the Tridentine Mass. Okay? And the very fact that the priest is facing the people, he is in constant dialogue with the people. And the people have to be responding to him with their focus on the altar and what is going on there. So if the people are not experiencing the mystery, don't blame the Mass. Okay?
Yeah, Father, we have 10 more minutes to end this session, and I have so many other questions, and then we'll open it up to people who have already tuned in.
Go ahead. I hope I'm not going out of track. Huh?
Not at all, Father. It's so interesting to...
Because you have to understand the whole background against what we are saying. Otherwise, you come out with all these statements that have absolutely no grounding.
But Father, you would also agree to a certain extent that there has the Novus Order, the new form of Mass, has led to a lot of abuse, especially because a lot of priests were not properly catechized and they took the liberalization of the Mass to a certain extreme. Would you say so?
I agree with you 100%. In fact, today there is a document, okay, that says explicitly, I don't know if all the priests know this, the Mass does not belong to the priest, the Mass belongs to the people of God. The priest is not ordained to do what he wants. The priest is ordained to be a minister of the church. Now we are talking about abuses. I agree with you 100%. There are so many abuses from the side of the clergy and from the side of the laity.
Yes.
And what is the reason? Lack of liturgical catechesis.
Yes.
So if I don't understand what the sign of peace is, what will I do? I will say turn to one another, smile, shake hands, say hello, okay, talk about the bazaar and all, okay, just to show that you're But this is not the Mass, for God's sake.
Yes.
Hug each other at the beginning to say that nobody said you have to do these things. If you just follow the rite of the Mass, and that is why we have what is called the GIRM. Have you heard of the GIRM?
No, Father.
It's called the General Instruction for the Roman Missal. I would encourage all my friends who are listening, GIRM, just go to the sacristy, take the Roman Missal, that big red fat book, go to the first pages, and you will see in absolute detail every part of the Mass. From the time the priest leaves the sacristy to the time he comes back. That is mystery. That is rite. That is celebration. That is meaning. Now, when this is abused, as you said very clearly, surely everyone is confused, starting with the people. So, as I said, blame the carpenter. Don't blame the chisel and saw. That's working well.
And also, Father, as you rightly said, the one of the main objective of Vatican II is bring more people in closer to the liturgical worship. But if you see, ever since Vatican II, it seems like the objective of Vatican II has not been met, because there has been steady decrease of attendance among Catholics all over the world, and people have stopped believing in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. So I know a lot of people blame Vatican II for this, but it's not Vatican II that was wrong. It was the implementation and the catechesis that went on after that, isn't it?
You have already given the answer to the question.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what I'm trying to say. If people want to make up their own opinion, their own perception, and today this is the culture of people, not just in the church, which was not there before Vatican II. Remember that also. Before 1960, we were living in a totally different culture. We bowed our heads to whatever our parents said. We never questioned authority. We liked to be told what to do. Now we have entered in a total different culture. Even a small brat who is 5 years old will question his parents. So people are questioning the church, they are questioning the Pope, they are questioning every Tom, Dick and Harry. But before you question, go through the documents, go through the history, go through the why you are questioning and what you are questioning, and how much is your knowledge in comparison to what the church is saying. That people are not ready to do. If everybody was catechetically instructed, if everybody was really literate, we would have no problem.
Yes.
No problem. And if people, I don't agree with that priest, so I don't go for Mass. That priest is not the Mass. Jesus is there. Go to meet Jesus. So you see, this is the reasoning of our people, which is absolutely foolish and ridiculous.
And I think,
but that's what's happening because we are living in such a culture today. A teenager will say, okay, you don't give me a mobile, I'm leaving the house. It's not the fault of the parents, it's not the fault of adults. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
So people who are talking like this should think twice before they make these statements. How much do they as individuals know about the rite of the Mass? How many of them are even going to Mass?
That is a more important question.
With a very determined sense of the spiritual. If you're going there to see who's singing in the choir and who's dressed in this way and which priest is saying the Mass and what jokes he's going to tell, you have lost the whole point. And sooner or later you'll throw out the baby with the bathwater.
And I also I think there is some truth to this statement, Father, that after Vatican II, among the Catholic, the clergy, they dropped the ball on the intellectual formation and the catechesis to a certain extent, isn't it?
Probably. No. I totally disagree with you. The church has always called for. In fact, today the focus is gradually shifted from catechesis of children to catechesis of adults. Look at the catechetical documents. Okay, we have the General Catechetical Directory, we have a directory for catechetics, and now we have the new directory for catechetics. They are all insisting upon catechesis. Now, there's another point. Today, you call people for adult faith formation. Father, I'm very busy. Father, no time. Father, I'm working and all. You have a nice party in the parish, and you'll have all of them there from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock. Where are our priorities? So don't blame the church, don't blame the mass, and don't blame the liturgy, and don't blame the teaching. There is an absolute abundance of church teaching which is so rich, which has not reached people. So it's the fault on both sides. Okay?
Yes, it's both, and I agree.
It's also the laity that is not making an effort to ask the right questions and to be instructed. Now, even after this talk, okay, those whose mindsets are fixed, they will not change, and I won't be surprised.
Yes, Father. I think that was an amazing session. I got to learn so much. So we are going to go through a lot of questions which is pouring in, Father. So can I read some questions that they mentioned that they would like
go ahead.
Anonymous? So I'm just going to read the question for you. So one of the person from a priest from the Syrian Rite, the Syro-Malabar Rite, says that when you mentioned that the tradition changes over a period of time, but it's never suppressed. So everybody sees the restriction on TLM as a suppression of tradition. What would you say for that, Father?
Absolutely no. Absolutely wrong to say that. Because the Tridentine Mass was a very rich celebration of the Eucharist and was absolutely good for its time. Don't forget that. I just now gave an example of how the culture has changed. And one of the underlying principles of the Vatican II was to move with the signs of the time. I'll use this word, which it's a rather strong word, okay, but I use it. We don't want a church that is fossilized, a church that is living in the catacombs. We want a church that is out. And in fact, one of the documents of Vatican II is the church in the modern world. Know what is happening around us, but that doesn't mean throw everything out of the window and just please everybody, please the Protestants, please those who are leaving. No, not at all. You want to leave the church, you leave the church. Christ told Judas, you want to go ahead. But I'm warning you that you're betraying the Son of Man. So the church will never hold us by the neck. Those days are gone. Okay. In fact, today, in those days, the famous words of Council of Trent was anathema sit. Have you heard that?
Yes, Father.
So people were deadly scared of that. So if they disagreed with the church, when they were going to hell. Today the church doesn't act like that way. The church treats lay people as adults. Ask questions. Okay, if you want to criticize, know what you're criticizing, why you're criticizing, and before you criticize, do your research. Okay, no, I like it, I feel caught up in heaven when I'm at the Latin Mass, but when I see this, that means you don't understand what you're doing. Okay.
And the second...
And one more, because this question came from another rite, please don't mix up the aspects of rites. Every rite has a richness, and the church is more than happy to welcome every rite, because that shows the richness and the diversity of the Catholic Church. Syro-Malabar Church is part of the Catholic Church.
So since we have already in this context further, I want to ask you the question that I asked you off air. So for the people who are really attached to the traditional Latin Mass, why can't we have a separate rite for them and make TLM as a separate rite and Novus Ordo as
Not at all. Not at all. You go out and form your own church, like Archbishop Lefebvre, no problem. But don't ask the church to accommodate you on your terms, which are contrary to the magisterium of the church. Let me say it loud and clear. Okay? Just because you don't like Pope Francis, just because you don't like the church, because you don't like the changes, because you don't like Vatican II, go out, start your own church, like Lefebvre, and go ahead. Nobody will stop you. But don't try to divide the church. The very fact that you're talking of an old mass and a new mass is already a division. And that is why Pope Francis has said very clearly, read that letter. He says, when the bishop, and he said very correctly, because Vatican II says the local bishop is the apostle.
The liturgist for
and
the
he's
diocese.
responsible for the liturgy. So, before the local bishop gives permission to any priest and any group, he has to ascertain whether this group is asking for the Latin Mass because of what you said just now. And what did you say just now? Because they want to form a separate rite. Then no permission can be granted. They have to explicitly accept the magisterium of the church, explicitly accept the rite of the Roman Missal that is in vogue today. There may be changes tomorrow. In fact, today, for those who don't know, this is the third editio typica of the Roman Missal.
Yes.
So even after Vatican II, there have been changes, and there will be more changes. So question that, read about it, and educate yourself.
And one of the complaints regarding the letter that Pope Francis sent out was the fact that he did not give much attention to the pastoral care of the people who are very attached to the traditional Latin Mass, and it puts the bishops in a very hot water because how will they reach out to these people? What would you say?
Who said that? Who said that? Who said that? The very words of that letter says that the bishop should grant permission taking into consideration the pastoral and spiritual care of the people. So this is absolutely contradictory to what Francis is saying. This is what I'm trying to tell you, that many people are reading that letter, okay, from their point of view, because they are hardened in a particular perception of their point of view. Nowhere Pope Francis said that he has either negated or dismissed or put down the Tridentine Mass. Okay? Because that would be against Traditionis Custodes, the title of this letter. He is the guardian of tradition. Okay, so he's not throwing tradition out of the window.
Another person from Bombay is asking this question, Father. If Pope Francis' idea is not to ban the traditional Latin Mass, why has he put restrictions on new priests learning the Tridentine rite?
It's a self-explanatory thing. I just now told you. Why is a priest ordained? A priest is ordained for the church, not for himself. This is the ordinary, lawful manner of celebrating the Eucharist today. The extraordinary Mass is extraordinary. It's just facilitating a group of, not even all people. That's why it cannot be celebrated in the parish church. It's accommodating, facilitating a group of people who are attached to that celebration. Now, for recently ordained priest who has never lived pre-Vatican, who has never celebrated anything in Latin, who does not even know Latin, what is he asking for? I can't understand. What is he asking for?
Because if he has grown up attending TLM, he would be wanting to...
How could he have grown up? How could he have grown up? By attending Mass that one priest is saying in one corner of the world? That is not growing up in the liturgical tradition. So this is what I'm trying to say. Okay, this is a phase that is gradually coming to the one and only rite of the Roman Missal in the Catholic Church. So don't be surprised if down the line, in a few years' time, the Tridentine Mass will no more exist. And this is not the first time. This has happened in the whole history of the Church from the Apostles up to Vatican II.
And also the TLM argument makes sense for a lot of traditionalists because they also see these other rites which are very close to the traditional Latin Mass, like the Byzantine or the Coptic, or in our case in India, the Syrian rite. So they feel that it is more beautiful than the Novus Order. So they think traditional Latin Mass is somehow superior to it.
Okay, so that's an interesting point of view. If you like that way, nobody forbids you from going and attending Mass there. But you can't put one leg in the Catholic Church and one leg in the Byzantine Church. Doesn't make sense. Where is your allegiance? And where is your understanding of the magisterium and the teaching authority of the Church? Okay. If you're going for external appearances and beauty and color and incense and all that, that's not the Mass. They're celebrating the same Mass that we are celebrating. What are you going there for? Ask that question.
Yes, that's the most important.
And spell it out. Spell it out. Just now you were talking about mystery, which is not there in the Mass today. So spell it out why you're going there.
And some people say in a world that we are living in today where there is so much of secularization and everything, there is a longing in the hearts of Catholics for something sacred, for something more mysterious or more beautiful. So, which is why they feel, the Trinity, the Latin Mass gives, kind of quench the thirst for that, thirst for more sacred.
Who said that the Roman rite today is not sacred? If you don't celebrate it in a sacred way, then it will not be sacred. In fact, one of the very, very strong words of the New English translation of the Mass is, please do not trivialize the Mass. You know the meaning of trivialize? Exactly what you said just now. Okay, don't bring in this thing, okay, let's hug each other now, okay, let's kiss each other and say, peace be with you. That's not the Mass. So if you're mistaking these things for the mystery and for the sacred, then you're not understood what we are doing. And that is, again, I repeat, we really have to bring people back to the awe and reverence that the celebration of the Eucharist, and that is why it is the source and summit of the Christian life. Okay, because it is sacred, because it is full of mystery, because it is the real presence of Christ. But if you throw that out of the window, then it's your fault, not the fault of the Mass.
I think the traditionalists are seeing too much of the external gestures and the
Exactly.
And they're gauging what is sacred and what is not, isn't it, Father?
Just ask these people how much Latin they know. Just ask these people how much of those sacred words they are grasping. So if you're in the clouds and you're watching a scenery, you're not in touch with reality. And that is what Vatican II is bringing us to. The liturgy is a full active participation in a real act of worship. And it's not just a group of people coming there. They are the body of Christ that is gathered together. And that is why it is this body of Christ that is through Him, with Him, in Him, Jesus Christ, giving glory to the Father. This is sacred. It's not secular. And I can show you the other parts of the Mass in the same way.
Yes, Father. I think this person, James Dsouza, is from Bombay. He says, as a little boy, I did serve Mass in Latin. Now, as a senior citizen, I still prefer Holy Mass in Latin because the reverence was there. Of course, you have to understand the language. Thank you for the clarification that Father gave.
Okay, tell Mr. James Dsouza, okay, to just put aside the Latin Mass for some time, attend the ordinary Mass, searching for the sense of the sacred, being fully attentive to every part of the Mass. Ask him to get that little booklet, The Order of the Mass. Ask him to take each word that is said by the priest and by the people, understand it, and he who has been an altar server will now find the same meaning in the Mass today. He does not need to go to the Latin Mass, which he does not understand.
That's well said, Father. And one of the correlations which I see people making is the abuses that have happened in the novice order, and somehow that is kind of proportional to what the mass is all about. I think that is what people make that wrong correlation. I think if you could clarify that abuses does not disubstantiate what is happening in the
I've
novice.
said this in many different ways. I come back to the example of the carpenter and his tools.
Yeah.
But I'll give you another example.
Mm.
Because today there are a number of priests who are caught in sexual abuses,
Mm.
does that mean the priesthood has lost its meaning?
Mm.
For every one priest who is caught in sexual abuse,
Mm.
there are thousands of others who are faithful to their vows.
Mm.
So don't judge the priesthood by the abuse of a few people. Don't judge the validity and the sacredness and the spiritual value of the Mass
Mm. Mm.
from the way it is celebrated by some priests
Mm. Mm.
and some laity.
Mm.
That's not the Mass. So don't talk about abuses. Abuses have got nothing to do with the Latin Mass and
The new
the
novice order.
Mass.
Yeah, and sometimes I tell them, the traditionalists, like if abuses is not a confined thing to the novice order alone, it can happen even in the TLM, right? So that.
See, marriage is the most beautiful thing that God has created.
Mm.
Now, because there are hundreds of marriages that are going through on the rocks, doesn't mean that marriage has got no meaning.
That's a good argument. Yes.
Doesn't mean that therefore I don't marry a woman, I marry my best friend with another man. That's not the solution, for God's sake.
Mm.
For God's sake. God created marriage and it's the most beautiful institution on earth. But if it does not work, that doesn't mean that marriage is bad and we throw it out. So this is what I'm trying to say. We are living today in a culture that is questioning everything on superficiality. Okay, on what is called relativism. This is another very important term. What I like is good, what I don't like is not good. Who says so? Who made you the judge of everything? Okay. Who made you the decider for the church? Okay, to have two rites, one Latin rite and one the ordinary rite. Who made you the judge? And that is why the Catholic Church has something beautiful which the Protestants are envying us for. And that is called the magisterium of the church. That keeps the church united. People will throw stones at the magisterium, which is quite okay. You disagree, but before you disagree, do your homework. And then come to this.
Yeah, Father. Father, now I have a set of very confusing questions which I gathered from a group of radical traditionalists. You can either answer by yes or no, or if you would like to explain it, that's also fine, Father. So the first complaint that they had was somehow in the novice order, the whole doctrine of priesthood is compromised because the priest is not facing the altar, and even during the sacrifice, after he takes the host and the blood of Jesus, he immediately comes to the congregation and he starts distributing it. There is no prayer preparation for the congregation. It seems like the priest is not set apart from the congregation. He's like one among the congregation. That's how they feel in the novice order.
I will just say one word. He is looking at the non-essentials.
Yes.
He has left out completely the essentials. What is the Mass? Is the Mass facing the wall? Is the Mass saying a prayer before coming down to give communion? That's not the Mass.
And the second point that he makes is about the sacrifice that happens in the Mass, and he somehow says the sacrifice is not complete in the novice order, and it's complete in the traditional Latin Mass because there is a set of prayers that is said in the Latin Mass to complete the sacrifice, something like that he was saying. Do you have any clarification on that, Father?
Tell your friend to go to the Eucharistic prayer and pick out how many times the word sacrifice is mentioned. This is the chalice of my blood poured out for you and for many. Is that not sacrifice? Does he want, in the Latin Mass, okay, his blood brought there and distributed, his flesh brought there and distributed. So what is he talking about? I can't understand. The whole Mass is the Paschal mystery, the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And if this is not sacrifice, then what is sacrifice?
And he made the contrary point to what you have been always saying, right, Father? The Mass is for the people, and the priest does not celebrate the Mass for himself, but for the people. See, he was making the point that somehow Mass is for the priest. The priest is the one who is sacrificing, and the most important person is the priest.
Tell my friend that he has not understood anything of Christianity. By baptism, everybody is ordained as a priest. The lay people share in the ordinary priesthood
Yes.
of Christ.
Yes.
The priest shares in the ministerial priesthood of Christ.
Christ, yeah.
What is the meaning of ministerial? Ministerial means service. A minister is the one who serves. So the priest is not ordained to be on top of the people. The priest is not ordained to be superior to people. The priest is ordained to be at the service of the people. So in the Mass, everybody, every single person present around the altar is celebrating the Mass. Tell your friend that if he doesn't know it. And what is the priest doing then? The priest is presiding over the celebration in persona Christi by his ministerial priesthood. That's all. In fact, there are many lay people who are so highly spiritual, or so highly, holy when they come to Mass, much more than the priest himself. They're all human beings. I cannot say that because I'm ordained, I'm more holy than the lay people. And because I'm ordained, I'm higher on a higher level. So this is a very wrong idea of pre-Vatican. So this is exactly the changes that the Council brought.
Father, I have 3 more questions, and one question outside the context. One of the persons has been constantly messaging. He says, why did the CBCI allow people to receive communion in hand?
This takes me back to another historical point of view. Did Jesus go around the Last Supper taking his body and putting it into the mouths of his apostles? He took the bread, blessed the bread, broke the bread, and gave it to his apostles. And he said, take and eat. When did this thing of putting it on the tongue come? It's an effect of the Jansenistic heresy. That's why I said, if you don't know your history, you say all silly things.
Yes.
When they said a person is not pure enough to receive communion, in fact, they were not receiving communion at that time. And I could go on, but there's no need. So now we have returned back to what is more meaningful. At the same time, again, the church is a mother and a teacher. So to facilitate the convenience of receiving communion, the church says you can receive it on the tongue if that's more comfortable for you, or you can receive it on the hand, you can receive it kneeling, or you can receive it standing. Because those are non-essential things. The thing is receiving the body and blood of Christ. So don't get stuck on these non-essentials, hand or tongue.
Okay. And the last question, Father, one of the person has said about Latin. Latin was used in the church as one of the main languages because Latin was also written on the cross. Jesus died. One of the 3 languages was Latin. So which is why we give such importance to Latin. What would you say for that?
When did Christ die?
When
in the Roman
Empire, yes.
Roman Empire. What was the language there?
Latin.
Okay, so today when you read INRI, what do you read? Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judeorum. Do you stop there? No. You say, Jesus the Nazarene, King of the Jews. I understand that. And I accept Jesus as the King. So don't get stuck on these silly points. These are non-essentials. You know, I can't understand why these have become big arguments.
Yes,
I mean, there's
exactly.
something much deeper.
Yeah.
Go
I.
to the depths of it. I'll conclude with three very important words. I use these words when I'm conducting my catechetic sessions.
Mm.
The first word is interiorization.
Mm.
The second word is assimilation.
Mm.
And the third word is personalization. If this doesn't happen right through your Christian life, whether it is the doctrine of the church or whether it's the liturgy of the church, then you have missed the point. Interiorize. The Mass is an experience, not a mystery to be enjoyed or just to raise you to some heights. It's an experience. So you got to interiorize it. For that you need attention, etc. It is assimilation. The word of God is not just read in Latin and dismissed. It has to become similar to your daily life. The whole celebration of the Mass has to become part of your life. And finally, personalization. It's not just a bunch of people who are there and one priest is saying something in Latin. What does it mean to you as a person? Christ is meeting you. There may be 2,000 people gathered, but Christ is meeting you. Is it a personal experience? So I would suggest that you invite your listeners to reflect on these 3 points. So whether it is Latin Mass, whether it is English Mass, whether it is Tamil Mass, if you have not interiorized the Mass, if you have not assimilated what you are celebrating, if you have not personalized the mystery that you are celebrating, you can say it in any language you want. It doesn't make a difference.
That's so well said, Father. I think, based on the last 1.5 hours conversation that we have had, I think the thing that the traditionalists are crying about and jumping up and down is most of the things are very non-essentials because they see something in it. They feel that, the church somehow has to approve that particular gesture or that particular practice. But church in its wisdom, as you rightly said, is both a teacher and a mother, has, discerned and said, okay, this is the one which can relate to the faithful in the best way possible, isn't it?
What did I say earlier? If they've already made up their minds, okay, if they are operating from a mindset that is refusing to change, you can have this session 100 times and nothing will happen to them. They will still criticize the thing. So I'm not surprised. There are people like that.
Yeah. My last question, Father. So like a lot of theologians talk about the 3 transcendentals. The human heart always seeks for the truth, the absolute truth, the absolute good, and the absolute beauty. So now the argument is that they see that all the 3 are found in the traditional Latin Mass somehow.
Who said so?
The traditionalists, they say. And
Who said so?
according
Spell
to
it out. Spell it out. Spell it out to me. Just don't make statements. Don't make statements. The Mass as we celebrate today is a supernatural, transcendental event.
Yes.
It is not a human thing of, just saying some words and just singing some songs and just doing some actions. So if people are stopping at that, they have lost it.
Okay, last question, Father. Since I'm a musician and I've been a choir leader for a long time, a lot of people have been accusing me for using, electronic music like the keyboard and all that. And the recommended one is the Gregorian chant or the pipe organ or people singing. But the Vatican II has relaxed certain things and given the authority
Not
for the...
relaxed. Wrong word.
Okay, given permission, would you say?
Wrong word.
Okay.
You don't need Vatican II permission. We have come to meet God. We bring whatever we have, the best of what we have, to our praise and worship of God. Who said the pipe organ is better than a guitar? Who said? Just because the Latinists want a pipe organ? Who said Gregorian chant is better than liturgical chants? Who said? And that is why today since you are a choir master and musician, make sure that the hymns are liturgical hymns. And for that, every diocese has a liturgical commission that scrutinizes the hymns. Not to give permission for guitar or pipe organ or Gregorian chant, but to see that you're not bringing any composition. Today for marriages, they are singing "You by my side."
Yeah.
Who's on your side, your wife or Jesus? Okay, let's end on that
Yes,
humorous
Father.
note.
Yes. Thank you, Father.
Thanks very much for giving me this opportunity. I hope I have not offended anybody. That was not my intention. But I had to be explicit, straightforward, direct, and I hope the points that I made are valid because they are the points of the church. They are not my points of view. Thank you. And I enjoy these sessions, even one-to-one, if people are interested.
Yes, Father, and I'm so thrilled that I had the opportunity to have this discussion with you because it was so rich, so enlightening, and so historic. That is what the Catholic faith is all about, right? So thank you for bringing shedding light on this. And I'm going to end the live, Father. So please stay on the call, and we can end with the prayer.